Prairie Mosaic is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, the North Dakota Council on the Arts, and by the members of Prairie Public.
Welcome to Prairie Mosaic, a patchwork of stories about the arts, culture, and history in our region.
Hi, I'm Barb Gravel.
And I'm Bob Danback. On this edition, we'll meet a collage artist, step back in time to a museum in Little Falls, Minnesota, and enjoy a string quartet performance. From the days of early settlement in Clay County in 1871, the struggle between the Dries, those who sought to ban alcohol, and the Wets, those who were in favor, was not resolved even with the repeal of Prohibition. A two-year exhibit at the Omcom Center in Moorhead looks at the role alcohol has played in the history of our region.
Alcohol has been a challenge for Clay County residents, as it is for everybody, really. Brought in a lot of money in the 1890s and the early 20th century, but it caused huge problems as well.
Settlement here in Clay County started mostly with the Northern Pacific Railroad coming here in 1871. And every year, wherever the construction stopped for the year, a tent town full of laborers popped up, and around the laborers came tent saloon gunmen, prostitutes, gamblers. You know, the Wild West happened in Minnesota too. With the spring, the laborers kept on building the track west. What was left behind was a better place. Farmers came and busted sod, and every time there was a new village, the people decided whether or not alcohol would be a part of it. Every town in Clay County is dry except for Moorhead and Barnesville. Barnesville may be for more cultural reasons, being a center of German Catholic settlement. Moorhead for business reasons.
In 1890, all the saloons in North Dakota closed, but they could stay open in Minnesota. So Moorhead, like many border communities, became a booze boom town, a place for thirsty North Dakotans to come to drink. By 1900, there were 45 bars operating in Moorhead. The population was about 3,700 at that time. So that's like one saloon for every 80 people in town. Clearly, it wasn't Clay County residents that were supporting these saloons. It was people coming from dry North Dakota. It was illegal to sell liquor in North Dakota, but for many years, it was possible to mail or phone in orders from North Dakota to liquor dealers here in Moorhead and have that stuff shipped out by rail and be there the next day. So it's pretty clear that North Dakota, though technically was dry, in many places it was soaking wet.
When North Dakota was dry and Moorhead was, the Las Vegas of getting drunk, and we had these beer palaces, that's not necessarily a nice place to live.
The result was street crime, domestic abuse, political corruption, deep political corruption here in Moorhead. And the city developed an unsavory reputation that took decades to live down.
There's a quote attributed to Solomon Comstock. He said, there were always many Moorhead citizens who were against liquor traffic, but on the other hand, if they took the 47 saloons out of Moorhead, what was left? Why, liquor was the principal business of Moorhead. Moorhead's greatest problem was whether to be pure or prosperous.
Along with the saloons and the growing power of the saloon industry, there was a backlash. There was one particular group, they had a saloon league, one of the most powerful special interest groups to ever come about here in this country. Here in Minnesota, they worked very effectively to get dry politicians elected to the Minnesota State Legislature. 30th of June, 1915, it passed a county bill, and the county went dry.
The Moorhead saloons closed with great fanfare and fireworks and a lot of sad drunks. Just because you make alcohol illegal doesn't mean people are going to stop drinking, it turns out. People still got their alcohol. These saloon men became owners of soda shops or cigar stores, candy stores, and liquor was still on the menu if you knew how to ask for it. The enforcement of prohibition was really differed from city to city, cop to cop. One great bit of evidence about this, in 1927, Moorhead citizens elected a new mayor. He enlisted the Moorhead City Police in the fight against alcohol. When they're told to bust these things, they know exactly where to go. The arrests skyrocketed from 7 alcohol-related arrests in 1926 to 116 in 1927, even more in 1928. The police knew exactly where to go. They just kind of had a live and let live policy. The very day that beer is made legal again, April 7th, 1933, they called it New Beer's Day. A lot of these guys go legit, pretty much.
Prohibition ended really in fits and starts. When Minnesota voted whether or not to ratify the 21st Amendment that repealed prohibition, the state voted wet. But here in Clay County, county voters still voted dry. Later in 1933, the 21st Amendment actually went into effect. They remained dry. But it was ridiculous. We were surrounded by places who were selling liquor. It was very easy to bring liquor into the community. It became a real farce. There were cards sitting on 3-2 bars saying, ask us about our 15-cent whiskeys. It was a ridiculous situation, and finally the county decided to have a county-wide vote on the liquor issue, and in 1937, finally, hard liquor sales and strong beer sales were allowed here in Clay County as well. And today we have a mixed bag, really a more complicated system of dealing with alcohol, and we're still trying to sort this all out.
I grew up in Moorhead, and I always thought history happened somewhere else. Looking more into the history of Clay County is just the most fascinating topic that I've ever run across.
Amber Fletchock is a collage artist working from the rugged forests of central Minnesota. Inspired by the nature surrounding her, Amber's work is a response to the chaos and abundance of modern times.
I always think of my collage work as a little pause in the chaos. Most people, when they initially see my pieces, they think that they are some kind of digital print. Until they get close up, then they realize that they are collage.
One thing that her work does really well is that she's able to present all these pieces of paper that you're familiar with on a daily basis, but when she puts them together in these maelstroms and these collages, you're able to enter and continually explore this other universe.
I've been pretty much making art my whole life. Probably by the time I was 5, I knew that that's what I wanted to do with my life, because my mom was a school teacher and an artist at heart, and we were taught to use our imagination and to make. When I'm starting a piece, I find one piece that I know I want to start the piece with, and then I start going through all my files and start building off of that. I look for the parts that speak to me at that moment, going through stacks and stacks of magazines. It's just a constant building and sometimes a destroying and starting all over again. It's all very, very fluid, and it seems intuitive in a sense because it has become so much a part of my craft, and I'm always learning along the way. And I have worked on a lot of small pieces so that I could learn my design and my style and my composition and what I gravitate towards. When I was in college, I was in a life drawing class, and I remember specifically having a hard time rendering a hand. So I took a piece from another drawing and tacked it right on top, and I was instantly amazed by the distortion and the tension that it created. Later on, I decided to completely go over to collage and use paper as my main medium. People are always giving me magazines when they find out what I do for a living. I value that these things could have a second life. When I'm creating, I'm also thinking about the people who have put in a lot of energy and work into making this thing that is temporary that becomes part of the piece too. It's almost like a collaborative work in a sense. I'm drawn to things that look like they come from nature. Fashion magazines are usually the best because there's a lot of folds and a lot of pattern work. And my new favorite thing is food and cooking magazines because there's a liquid quality, a fluidity, and there's little charred parts and great color. I'm really drawn to that. I'm fortunate to have 2 dogs that get me out every single day. So I get to see all the subtleties of the seasons changing and the drastic changes too. And they definitely help in that process of creating. My work is very reflective of that and the shapes that are found in nature. Certain times they're very, very lush, and then there's times in which things are decomposing. It will never be the same collage as the piece that you started with and knew was finished. Things change. That's probably the hardest thing. By placing things next to each other that you wouldn't think normally would work, and that's when you get those discoveries and those aha moments that this is my new direction that I go into.
Working with paper, as anyone has done, when you're a child, they have memories of Elmer's glue, and it turns out to be like a mountain of adhesive and messiness. Many people, when they approach her framed pieces, they see them as digital cutouts just because the process is done in such a pristine way. There are sometimes hidden messages or hidden chasms that people can explore visually that maybe previous to that they've never thought about. So this is an installation piece from Amber Fletchock. This is the largest scale we've had of hers in the gallery. The installation has probably been our most looked at piece in this show.
This installation was created about 2 years ago, and at the time I was grieving the loss of my mother, and I was having a hard time concentrating on my work. The process of the cutting and the act of the repetition sort of became like a meditation. When the viewer walks in, they're confronted with a dark wall, and beyond that they see a little shaft of light, and then you arrive through the blue sky, and it goes to the earth and to the grass, and then it blossoms. The whole goal is to have people experience nature, go outside, notice those little details, because it makes life more precious if we can see those things.
World-famous aviator Charles Lindbergh developed his love of nature and flying in his hometown of Little Falls, Minnesota. Today, his childhood home and family farm have become a place where visitors can step back in time to experience life at the dawn of the modern age.
1916, Charles says they're going to spend their first winter here, and they've had to winterize the house. Now you're at the Lindbergh house. Come on this way.
This is where Charles developed his ideas as an adult. This is where he saw his first airplane and was reading all those stories during the First World War about fighter pilots and just the romance of the air. And it's where he really connected with the environment, growing up on a farm.
And at 7:52, the Spirit of St. Louis began to roll down the muddy runway.
In 1927, after Lindbergh made his famous flight, this house was abandoned. Nobody was living here. The family still owned it. They had moved all their possessions out because his mother had moved out in 1920 as well as Charles. And it was ransacked. The people in this area came to this place. Lindbergh was so famous, they just wanted to have a little piece of him. And as a result of all of this, there was a big rally in the community to to preserve this house. They recognized its significance, and they worked with the family to create Charles A. Lindbergh State Park. And the park is named after Charles's father, C.A. Lindbergh, who was a congressman for the state of Minnesota out in Washington, D.C. for 10 years.
Come on this way.
The family donated the 110-acre farm with the house and the tenant house and the few remaining outbuildings to the state of Minnesota in 1931 for that purpose.
Watch your step, though.
In 1954, after his mother's death, Charles went through all of her possessions and started sorting things out. Anything that pertained to here on the farm in Minnesota came to the Minnesota Historical Society. And we've really tried to set it up in a way so that it's authentic to how it was when Lindbergh was a boy. That's the neatest part for me about this site is Lindbergh's involvement in the late 60s and early 70s before his death. He told MHS staff his stories of his youth and said this goes here and that goes there.
He does all the plumbing. The water is pumped through that big, majestic wood stove in the kitchen.
And so when you walk through the house today, it looks very much like it did in the 19-teens. Behind me is Evangeline's piano, which is a wedding present from her husband in 1901. We've got dishes in the kitchen, Charles's bed out on the porch. Some of his toys are on display either here in the historic house or over in the visitor center. So you get just that feel of walking into the past and what Charles's life must have been like as a youth.
Sorry, Mrs. Lindbergh, we've got lots to do today. We'll have to maybe do it later.
Once a month, we try and step back in time and really immerse ourselves in the world of Charles's youth. In 1918, Charles was running the family farm. He is released from school in order to do so to help supply food for the war effort. They have lived in this house for a whole year. And just it allows us to tell some of those key stories of his youth, of what it was like to be on a farm. What is it like to finally spend a winter in a house that wasn't designed to be inhabited in the wintertime?
Another interesting story is our well.
I think the public enjoys the stories about Charles, learning from his mother what this famous man was like as a boy, and that as a boy he wasn't that different than you or I as a child.
Your children carry firewood for your family, right? Yeah. Yes, of course you do.
That he played outside and got into trouble and all of these other different things that kids do, and that his world was changing so rapidly around him, that he grew up in an era of war. And what did that do to his life? How did that change him? How did that inspire him? You forget his roots. He was so large, so big. His flight came along right at the time that modern technology with the film industry and radio, and that's all you saw was that public face. And he was such a private person that you wouldn't have heard about his farm life unless you knew him from here in Little Falls as a youth.
Charles will split the firewood, and then I have some nice firewood to start my stove in the morning. But
I think a lot of historic sites do the living history because it connects the visitor with the past so much better than a textbook can.
They actually forget where they are and what year it is because it's just so intense.
To be able to come to the place where it happened, to walk through the halls and to interact with characters who are portraying people from the past and can communicate that emotion, the deeper feelings behind just the facts, I think is what makes it come alive, and it's entertainment as well as education for the visitor.
The University of North Dakota Student String Quartet visited our studio for a special appearance on our series, Prairie Musicians. Here's a sample of their outstanding performance.
If you know of an artist, a topic, or an organization in our region that you think might make for an interesting segment, please contact us at prairiemosaic@prairiepublic.org. I'm Bob Dambach.
And I'm Barb Gravel. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Prairie Mosaic.
Prairie Mosaic is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, the North Dakota Council on the Arts, and by the members of Prairie Public.